Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. My name is Charisse Walker, and I'm your host of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. This is a place where we come together to learn, grow, and inspire. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. My name is Charisse Walker, your host, and here's my question for you. Have you ever taken a personality test and you're like, oh, I'm this type of person, or I'm this type of person, or I'm never going to be able to do this because I'm this way? Well, Shannon Sauer-Zavala is here, and she is a psychologist, and she is going to talk to us about how that might be a myth. So I'm excited about this because I don't love the personality test, but I absolutely love to see what people say and some of the results. And so, Shannon, without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Charisse. I'm so excited to be here. I am a mom of two daughters and a partner and a clinical psychologist. I'm also a researcher and professor at the University of Kentucky, and I specialize in basically developing evidence-based treatments to nudge personality traits that are no longer serving us. So, like people pleasing or perfectionism or neuroticism, which is like just kind of being a worrier. And I'm also, and I think this is relevant, I am a recovering overachiever perfectionist.
I love that you say that. And I think my life changed dramatically. I think it was, I don't know, I just had a surgery on my hip, and I literally was a little doped up on pain pills. And I was laying in my bed and I was scrolling, and this lady kept coming up on my Facebook feed. And so I kept like, because you always get inundated with people. And so I
Sure.
dismissed it. And then she showed up again, and she showed up, and it had to do with my industry, which was real estate. And so I'm like, well, if she can follow me and she knows how to do that, I want to learn how to do that. So I hired her, a little doped up. And when I did, like, she immediately said, I'm given everything I have. I almost have nothing left. And the program was like 23 or $25,000.
Oh, wow.
It's
Yeah.
the first time I'd ever invested that much in myself like that, other than college,
Yeah.
obviously. And so I said to her, I said, you need to, like, I want my money back. And she calls me and she's like, well, why? And I said, because you keep saying that you don't know how you're going to make it through, that you've given all your money into this. And like, I was high on drugs when I signed up, so I wasn't even of sound mind. So I really want my money back. And I go, and then she sent me this link to download this 200 page, almost 150 page workbook. I said, I coach with somebody else who charges me $300, and I get the entire workbook for free. And so
Yeah.
I said, as much money as I've spent in your program, I'm not okay with this. And long story short, she sent me the workbook, and that became implemented into her whole program. She is an incredible success with everything that she's done, amazing mentor and example. And I did stay with her for actually 5 years. But when I first signed up with her, she did more for me than the real estate. Like the real estate, yeah, taken off, very successful. But my mind, totally different. I used to be this
Mm-hmm.
victim. I used to be this peacemaker. I used to be like you, an overachiever. And although there's still some of that. Like I embrace that I'm not a victim. I have full control over myself and like all these things. And so I love that you teach about personality traits, and that I love that you said the things that are no longer serving us, because so many times you're right. People say, I'm this type of person, I'm this type of person. And it's like, why are you putting yourself in a box?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, what type of experiences have you had along your journey in your career that you can share with us? Because I love stories, obviously. I just told you one, where you help people get out of that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I can start by talking a little bit about my own personality change journey. I started out as like not a particularly conscientious person, a person that like skipped class enough times in high school that I had to repeat algebra 2 the following year, right? And it wasn't until I found something that I was interested in that I had like the motivation to change, right? And so nudging your personality is really challenging, right? So you really have to have a values aligned reason to do it, right? Like I think like the sort of like quintessential example is like, you know, introverts feeling like the world is telling them they should be more extroverted. And like, I don't actually subscribe to that, right? I think there's no optimal extroversion versus introversion level. It's just that if you're an introvert and you want to move into a leadership position, for instance, you might need to be a little bit more assertive, right? And so you might need to develop that trait in yourself. And and so for me, I realized that I wanted to go to school for psychology. I wanted to go to graduate school, and I probably wasn't going to get into graduate school if I didn't like get my act together. And that was really a powerful motivator for me to start like buckling down, I guess. And any like psychology 101 textbook will tell you that like when you do something and you get rewarded for it, you're going to do it more, right? So I started to do well on exams, started to study, started to go to class, right? And like was getting rewarded for that. And that really snowballed over 15 years. Like fast forward, I'm like a new assistant professor, pretty prestigious job, like doing like clinical grant funded clinical trials and had a baby and was like, I am overwhelmed. I am doing all these things. I'm giving everything 100% and I am burning out, right? And so that's where it's like that trait of conscientiousness, or some might call it rigid perfectionism, it was no longer serving me, right? So it's sort of like the pendulum had shifted the other way. And I think having kids, right, like that was the motivator for me. Like it's okay if I burn myself out if it's just me, but I don't want to be demonstrating this to my kids, and I want to make sure I have something left to give when I come home from work. And I do this work with my clients, right? So thinking about people that have had reasons to have difficulty trusting others in their lives, right? Like we carry these narratives, and that's actually a personality trait too. It's called like I mean, it's like a feature of what we call like low agreeableness. And basically, it's like not being able to trust others. And usually, what I do with people is have them notice any self-limiting beliefs that they have, right? For me, in my less conscientious days, I would say things to myself like, I need the adrenaline of the last minute to start the project, which is literally not a fact, but that's what I was telling myself. My client that feels like they can't trust people might be saying to themselves, other people are only looking out for themselves, or I can't count on people to show up when I need them. So we look out for these self-limiting beliefs, and then we follow the through line to, how do these beliefs affect my behavior, right? So in my case, it means waiting to the last minute to start an assignment and feeling more stressed. In the case of my clients, it might be like not being honest with partners, or I'm going to leave you before you leave me, or things like that, right? And so we talk about, I mean, we have a really explicit conversation about like validating why those traits may have come in handy in the past, right? So like, protecting yourself from vulnerability when if you've been hurt in the past makes a ton of sense. But if your goal is to have fulfilling long-term relationships, those behaviors aren't serving you anymore. And so what would it look like to be more trusting? What would somebody that's more trusting do in relationships? Try that, right? And as that gets rewarded, we can see these upward trajectories of personality change.
I love that. I actually had this conversation with someone really close to me last week. We were looking through something, and she was like, I had no idea about this, but she was this very outgoing person in high school, and to the point where she was voted queen of garden. What I don't know what it was. It was old, a long time ago. And the person, and I've only known her for a decade and a half, and she is this victim that's always sick and that's just so frail, and just it's hard to be around this person because of her victim mentality. And I turned to her, I said, when did things change? What? What are you talking about? I said,
Yeah.
no, really, because I've only known you to be this type of person. And I didn't mean it in a rude way. It was just like,
Right.
we need to have a hard conversation. And so, how do you work with people that might not even recognize it? That, because she thinks she's happy, she would say she's happy. And she asked me, well, do you think I'm happy? And I said, 100% no. What? And I
Yeah.
said, no, you're always complaining about things. And she'll say she's healthy, but yet, she was in the ER this week, and it was interesting when we went to visit this frail person who was taken by ambulance because she was so frail, right? But her vitals were 100% okay. She was totally fine. But when we get there, she's like, "Oh, I have to go because my ride's here." And we said, "Huh? What? No, you were taken by ambulance. Let's figure out why you're so
Oh.
sick and stuff." And so it was just interesting. And when they brought her a blanket, she was like a kid in a candy store, so excited. And it
Mm-hmm.
was at that point I realized, oh my gosh, you're getting the attention and people are waiting on you and you love that. And that's her fix.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's how do you work with people that might not recognize that they have these things that really they need to change?
Yeah, I mean that's a $1 million question, right? And so as a psychologist, you and I work with adults, and so people are usually like getting in touch with me and saying, there's a problem. I want therapy, right? Or they're getting in touch with me for more like coaching or like healthy personality change, right? It's like they're identifying a problem. So often by the time they get to me, they maybe wouldn't describe themselves as happy or completely fulfilled, right? They know that there's something missing. That said, so it can be, well, I'll say this, it can be really hard for people who are not even aware that there's a problem at all
Right.
to see that, right? And so I don't see a ton of that in my practice. But what I will say is that a lot of times people come and they think they know what the problem is or what's causing the problem, and you have to really delicately help them see how the patterns of behavior and thinking that they're engaging in are actually holding them back. So when I work with somebody who's perfectionistic at work, they might say, I just want to work on my stress. I need to work on my stress level. I'm really anxious. Okay. And so then they think that the solution is learning time management strategies so that they can get more done in faster, efficiently. And 9 times out of 10, that's not the solution, right? Like it's not that they don't know how to keep a planner or how to optimize their schedule. And so what I have to kind of lead them to is you're actually putting more effort and energy into tasks that don't require it. That's why you're so burnt out and stressed, right? And the the solution is not to figure out a new system so you can do more, it's to actually do less, right? And so we do what's called exposure, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy strategy where we ask people to do the thing that they're afraid of and see what happens. So in this case, it will sound very minor, but to the people I work with, it's not. It'll be like, send an email without proofreading it. Or it'll be like, leave work at 5, even if you're not done with the thing that you're doing, because I bet it'll be there tomorrow when you get there, right? And then see what happens. And most of the time, literally nothing happens, right? It's so anticlimactic.
Mhm.
But when you strive for perfection and you've performed really well, it's like your friend, right? When she performs frailty, right? She gets rewarded with attention, right? Like when I'm perfectionistic and I check all the boxes, right? I get rewarded for that at work, get promoted, get, get this positive attention. And so I never learn that nothing bad will happen if it's less than perfect, right? Because I've always held myself to that standard. And so you have to kind of like test those beliefs for your friend. Like, is there a way that she could get that attention in a different way?
Yeah, $100 million question. Okay, so as a manager or as a boss or an owner, right? Because I think that we as entrepreneurs, it's very easy to have the squirrel mentality, and we look, and so I think sometimes people, as an entrepreneur, we are aware of our weaknesses. Yes, we need help, but now that we hire people and we see that there's certain characteristics in people, and I always say this like a coach, right? A coach can see your potential, they can see what you can do, they can see. And that's where you hire them to help you get to this other point. And so, as a manager or a leader, and we're seeing somebody who might be demonstrating some of these characteristics, how can we help manage them to achieve their potential?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think part of this goes back to personality testing, like especially at work, and the narratives that we tell ourselves about what the results mean, right? So, a lot of times at work, whether as an entrepreneur, if you are working with a coach, right? Like a lot of times they'll give like a personality test, right? Like a Myers-Briggs or a DISC or something like that. I think like a lot of times, if we're not careful, the narrative can be, well, these are your traits, these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses. Let's align with your strengths, right? And so then people sort of get this message of, well, I'm just not good at that part of it. So I should hire somebody, or I just shouldn't take my business in that direction because that's not a strength of mine. And the my research and research of lots of people that study personality and personality across the lifespan can say that the data don't really support that, right? So like what we see is that personality changes as people age. We tend to get more responsible, tend to get more emotionally stable, like less neurotic, which I know is hard to believe, but that's what the data say. Tend to be more oriented towards a relationship, tend to be more open to new ideas as we age. And that's just like natural. And what we see in the studies that I do in my research lab is that we speed up and see 20 years worth of natural personality change in about 20 weeks with cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. So I think part of the first thing I think is rewriting the narrative around traits, right? Like, and that strengths and weaknesses, and that I should stay in my lane and do what I'm already good at, right? I think it's really worth people considering that they can let their goals, their aspirations, their dreams dictate the traits that they try to develop rather than start with the traits you have and just do the job you'd already be good at. So I think that's the first piece. I think as managers or having employees and I think demonstrating that growth mindset is really important, starting that culture where it's like, you know, giving people opportunities to try different things and like kind of having the attitude of like, you don't have to be great at this the first time, but like, let's just see how it goes. And then reinforcing people, thinking about how reinforcement is given. Is it once a year as a raise, or how are you telling someone that they did a good job so that they feel like, oh, let me keep trying that?
I
I think
love
that's,
that.
how you might think about it.
That's cool. So you talked about the personality tests. Is it worth giving those tests to your, like, is it worth using it as a screening tool for your employees?
No. So like if you take tests like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram, there hasn't really been a lot of studies looking at like their validity, like do they do what they say they're supposed to do? But the few that do exist say that they're about just as good at predicting career success as your zodiac sign. So like I don't think it's a great tool unless, you want to hire a Libra because they'll probably be good at customer service, right? So that's like this is like getting like kind of science weeds, but that's like predictive validity. Like, does the test tell us something about the future? And really, no, it doesn't, right? Because personality changes. So, like, where you are today isn't necessarily going to predict your performance at work in a year or two, you know? The other problem I think with a lot of like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram is that they put people into categories like you're an INFJ or a type 7 or whatever. And people don't exist in categories, right? You're not an introvert or an extrovert. You're on like a continuum,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
so when we think about giving a personality test, there actually are science-based personality tests. I have one available on my website. And so I think it's really unfortunate because the people that are doing personality science research, we have our set of measures that have been validated over 100 years of personality science. And then there's like the Myers-Briggs that was like developed by like this lady and her daughter, like literally. So I think if we want to think about personality, so my advice would be to give a personality test that's validated in science. So you're going to want to look for one that's based on the big five or the five-factor model of personality. And I can send you a link after this if you want to put in the show note that links to like personality tests that your listeners can take.
Mhm.
So that's the first step, use an evidence-based one. And then I think the
Mhm.
second step is like the mindset, which is this can change. Like this is a starting point, not a destination.
I love that. And that now makes sense why I cannot stand that test, the Myers-Briggs. I'm just like, this is the stupidest test. And sorry for anyone that takes it, but I'm not sorry. Because when I read it, I mean, first of all, I'm like, it depends on the situation, right?
Right.
If I'm a mom, if I'm a wife, if I'm a business person, I'm an entrepreneur, it really does depend on the situation, I think, first of all. And to say which one are you the most of will win.
Yeah. And I think like it's been a while since I've taken the test, but I think it's yes, no. It's like dichotomous versus like a big five questionnaire is gonna be like, are you an overthinker? And that's the question, but then it's like never, sometimes, like a little bit, there's like a range, right? So that you can kind of factor in, well, I do overthink about work, but I don't overthink about like family relationships or whatever it is, so you can factor that in.
That makes sense why all the science tests are usually always, sometimes never, occasionally.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's
Um,
not as sexy as like you're a protagonist or whatever if you get that label from Myers-Briggs, but it's better data for you in terms of learning about yourself.
I am so happy you came on because I really it is hard. And I remember taking this test once. This guy wanted me to be on his team. And so I took the test and he goes, well, you didn't really pass that test. And it doesn't, you're not
How do you
really,
pass a personality test?
well, he's looking for a specific type of person. He goes, and so, I think that you could be this type of person and I'd still like you to be on my team. Well, yeah, because you'll make money off me. I mean, really.
Right.
I
Yeah.
didn't join them because I just thought I 100% disagree. And if you call
Yeah.
it a test, I'll fail whatever you want it to be anyway. Like I remember, I don't know, I was like 18 or 19, applied to be a supermarket worker or something. This is before Walmart was big, but I failed the test. I'm like, I can't even work as a stalker because I failed. What are you testing for? Because very
Like
successful in
compliance.
college, very successful. I know. It was just funny. And I said, okay, well, that's obviously not for me, which everything works out for a reason. But
Yeah.
I really do think that if you want to be a certain type of person, if you want to be a leader, if you want to own your own company, if you want to, whatever it may be, if you really do work hard and you have a desire to learn, you can.
100%. Yeah. And if you can step past the fear to step outside of your comfort zone, then you like, will grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You might
100%.
not be the best at it, but at least you can do it, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay, so you said you're a mom. We're going to switch gears for a minute because time is short. And I just wanted to ask if you were sitting on a park bench and a 19-year-old brand new mother came and sat next to you and you started talking, what is one piece of advice or more that you would give unsolicited that you would give her? And it doesn't have to be just as a new mom, just as a mom, what you've learned since, because I know that a lot changed for you when you had yours. So what advice would you give?
I would say that there are a lot of voices in the conversation, whether it's mom influencers on Instagram or TikTok, or like sitcom moms, or how your own mom was, right? There's a lot of narratives around what a good mom like looks like or should be. And what I have seen in my work is that there's a lot of different approaches to like being with your kids. And there isn't there isn't a perfect way to do it, right? And so connect with what's important to you and what you want to pass along to your kids and lean into that and try to filter out all of the voices that are telling you, oh, you should do this, you should do that. So for example, I am very staunchly like, I will not join the PTA or volunteer because like I want, like, my value is to spend time with my children. And if I have to leave my house to go volunteer on some committee, then I'm not spending time with my kids.
Mhm.
And my value too in that regard too is like, I want to raise happy children. I don't necessarily, like, I think it's a success if I raise happy children, not like, successful or like accomplished children. So you got to figure out what it is that's important to you and then tune out the rest of the noise.
Totally agree with you. And uh, there's somebody that I know very well, and I recently looked at the profile online, and the profile is I'm the mom of, and I don't want to give it away, but her daughter was very successful and won a certain big thing in like 2011. And so she's still in her thing says, I'm a mom of this person 2011. And then her son is very successful in this thing. And so she identifies as the mom of this. And like she's titling herself for what her kids have accomplished,
Mhm.
nothing about her. And I
Yeah.
just thought, so you're living on the success of your children, and that's how you're identifying yourself. And so sometimes we as parents try to live through our kids. Hey, I always wanted to do this growing up, so now I'm going to make you do it. Or, and a good example, and I've never admitted this, so I hope that, but my mom wanted me to play the oboe. I
Oh.
hate the oboe. I hated it from the day that I picked it up, but I took lessons. I played it for 5 years because I wanted to please my mom. I hated
Mhm.
the oboe. I loved the flute, and I would have stuck with the flute, but I wanted to please her.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting that we as children feel pressured to try to make our parents happy. And sometimes our parents have always, and not that my mom ever wanted to play the oboe. I don't even know how that came to be a thing, but we have to, I think, be careful sometimes. Are we putting this pressure on our children because we want them to be a certain way, or are they really interested in this?
Right. Yeah, I think that's really great, like insight into like what we need to be thinking about when we're pushing our kids.
Yeah,
Or
love that. Well,
yeah.
if someone wanted to get a hold of you or one of our listeners, how would they do that?
Yeah, so I will send you a link to like include in your show notes. That's like sort of a direct link to all the stuff I do, to the personality test, to like some strategies for some science-backed strategies for breaking free from perfectionism and people pleasing. So I'll send that. But probably the most direct way is my website, which is www.personality-compass.com, or follow me on Instagram, which is at self.made.personality.
I love that. And do you help people like through Zoom meetings? So if my friend, well, I wanted
Yeah.
to encourage her, because she does need some help, that you could help them online.
Yeah, exactly. So I do like, I mean, I'm a practicing clinical psychologist, so I see people that are struggling with mental health difficulties. And I have this, located in Kentucky, but I have this, it's called PsyPAC certification. And basically, like, I want to say there's like 45 states that have enacted PsyPAC legislation. So I can see people with my Kentucky license across any of the states that are involved in that. And then, yeah, then I do like sort of coaching or working with like high achieving working women that have the good girl syndrome, as I call it, the perfectionism, the people pleasing, and are just like, I've done everything right for so long. Like, why am I feeling so burnt out and unfulfilled?
Mhm.
Um, and so I like to do that work as well.
That is amazing. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for being on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Charisse.
Yes. And Unbreakable Mompreneurs, I hope that you heard something that helped you today. Definitely, I love psychology and I love um, helping people like you understand that you don't have to live a narrative of somebody else's narrative. It's yours and you have control over that. And don't put yourself in this box. Don't put baby in the corner because you don't need to. Figure out the title of that or the movie that came from. But I hope that you have a great day and make it the best that you can. See you later. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.